The cafe wasn't special. It sat between a pharmacy and a florist, its windows always fogged with the smell of coffee and rain. I came there most nights after work, not for the coffee, really, but for the quiet. It was the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. Until she started coming. She always ordered chamomile tea. Never sugar. Never milk. Always at the same table near the window, the one where the light from the street hit her hair just right. The first night I noticed her, she was reading a book but not turning the pages. I remember thinking she looked like someone waiting for a message that would never come. The next time, she nodded at me. That small. Just a flicker of acknowledgement, but it sat in my chest for hours afterward. Working late again, she asked once, when I walked past her table. I smiled. You remember? You order the same thing every time, she said, tapping her cup gently. You're predictable. There was something in her tone, not teasing, not cold, just aware. I sat down 2 tables away, pretending to scroll my phone, though I wasn't reading a thing. I kept catching myself glancing up, eyes drifting to the curve of her hand around the cup, the way she pushed her sleeve back before lifting it. She looked up once and caught me. I laughed awkwardly, folded my napkin just to have something to do with my hands. She smiled, faintly. You don't have to pretend you're not looking. That line stayed with me for days. Her name was Mara. She was 46. I found that out 2 weeks later when she left her driver's license on the counter. I was 24. I shouldn't have cared, but something about the distance between those numbers made everything sharper, quieter. Over the next month, the cafe became less of a place and more of a rhythm. She'd come in after her evening walk, I'd drop by after work. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. There were nights when all we shared was silence, and it was enough. She told me little things, that she lived nearby, that she used to teach literature, that she'd stopped checking her messages after her divorce because nothing urgent ever comes at night. Once, I told her I liked how she never rushed to fill silence. She said, that's because I know what people sound like when they're afraid of it. After that, I started noticing small things, her tired laugh, the way she stared out the window too long, how she never looked at her phone when it buzzed. One night, when I was closing my laptop, she asked softly, do you ever get lonely, even when you're around people? Every day, I said, before I could stop myself. Her eyes lifted to mine, not with pity, but recognition. That was the first night she smiled differently. Like she understood something I hadn't said aloud. Before leaving, she touched my wrist briefly, just 2 seconds, maybe less. But it felt like an entire sentence neither of us knew how to write. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message. Mara, you left your charger. Come by if you want it back. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over reply. It was past midnight. Outside, the rain started again, soft, endless. I didn't know it then, but that was the night everything began to end. I went to her house the next morning to pick up my charger. It was the first time I'd seen her outside the cafe. Her place looked exactly like her, quiet, deliberate, a little too clean. Books stacked unevenly on the coffee table, a cup half filled with cold tea, curtains pulled just enough to let the light fall softly across the room. You found it, I said, as she handed me the charger. I'm good at finding things that don't want to be found, she said, half smiling. I didn't know what to do next. I was standing there like a kid at a door he shouldn't have knocked on. She must have seen it. Coffee, she offered, already turning toward the kitchen. I followed her voice, the low, steady rhythm of someone used to talking to herself. The kettle whistled. She poured the water, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. I noticed a ring mark on her finger, faint, like a ghost of something that used to matter. You were married, I said before I thought about it. Her hand froze mid-air. Was, she said quietly. Long enough to forget what it's supposed to feel like. The room went still after that. She stirred sugar into her cup even though she never drank it sweet. We sat across from each other at her kitchen table. 2 cups between us. 2 stories we hadn't told. She asked me about my job, my friends, my plans, small talk that tried to sound casual. I told her about finishing school, about moving here for work, about how the city didn't feel like mine yet. "Does anyone wait for you?" she asked. I shook my head. "No one who notices when I don't come home." Her eyes softened. For a second, she looked younger, almost fragile. "That kind of quiet can eat at you," she murmured. "You start filling it with people who don't belong there." I wasn't sure if she was warning me or herself. A silence settled, but not an empty one. The kind that hums between 2 people who are both trying not to say what they already know. When I stood to leave, she followed me to the door. I bent to tie my shoes, she reached to steady my shoulder without thinking. Her hand lingered a second too long. Neither of us moved. "Thanks for the coffee," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She smiled, small, sad, but real. "You don't have to thank me for company." Outside, the air was cold. I walked halfway down the street before I looked back. She was still standing at the door, one hand on the frame like she was holding something in place. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Or maybe because I knew, even then, I was already too close to something that couldn't last. It was raining again. It always seemed to rain when I saw her. We were sitting on a park bench, halfway under a tree that wasn't doing much to help. The world felt washed out, cars moving slowly, leaves plastered to the ground, her umbrella forgotten beside us. She'd asked me to meet her. No reason. Just, "If you're free, come by the park." She was quieter than usual. Tired maybe. Her hair clung to her neck, and she kept rubbing her hands together like she was trying to remember warmth. "You've been avoiding the cafe," she said finally. "I've been busy." "With what?" I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened. "I don't know. Maybe trying not to be obvious." She gave me a look, half amusement, half concern. "You think you've been subtle?" "Guess not." The rain deepened. She shifted closer, enough that I could feel the cold coming off her coat. For a second, neither of us said anything. I could hear her breathing, steady, deliberate. "Mara," I said softly, "do you ever wish you didn't care what people thought?" She didn't look at me. "Every day. But I've learned to pretend I do." Her voice cracked slightly. "Just once." It wasn't sadness, exactly, more like fatigue from holding herself together for too long. She picked at the edge of her sleeve. "My ex used to say I'm good at pretending nothing gets to me." He was wrong. Everything gets to me. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just watched the water gather on the bench between us. "You shouldn't be here," she said after a while. "I know." "Then why are you?" I swallowed. "Because I don't know how to stop thinking about you." The words hung there, raw, unpolished, too loud for the kind of silence we lived in. She turned her face away, jaw trembling slightly. "You're young. You think that's something rare." "It isn't." "I don't think it's rare," I said. "I just think it's real." That made her look at me, really look. Her eyes were wet, but not from the rain. She exhaled, slow and trembling. "You have no idea how dangerous that sounds coming from you." I almost reached for her hand, but she shifted, just enough that the space between us felt deliberate again. We sat there, listening to the rain hit the umbrella beside us. She looked down at her phone, thumb hovering over a name I couldn't see. "Mara," she met my gaze. A second too long. A breath too deep. The air between us shifted, something fragile and reckless rising in it. Then she stood. "We should go." The moment broke like glass. For 3 days, she didn't come to the cafe. The first night, I told myself she was busy. The second, I switched tables, pretending I wasn't waiting. By the third, I stopped pretending. I just sat there, watching the door open for everyone who wasn't her. When she finally appeared, she wasn't alone. A boy, maybe 18, maybe younger, walked in behind her, carrying her books, joking about something I couldn't hear. She smiled at him, the same small, careful smile she used to give me. He called her mom. Something inside me went still. She saw me then. Her expression faltered, just a flicker, before she nodded in quiet acknowledgement and kept walking. She didn't stop by my table. Didn't say a word. That night, I didn't finish my coffee. I just sat there until the lights dimmed and the barista started stacking chairs. I didn't see her again for almost a week. When she finally texted, it wasn't what I expected. "You left your notebook here last time. I'll keep it safe." No greeting. No question. Just distance, folded neatly into words. When I went to her house, she didn't answer the first knock. The second, I heard her voice from inside, calm, practiced. "You shouldn't have come." Her tone wasn't angry. It was protective. Of who, I wasn't sure. "Mara, I have a son," she interrupted softly. "He's home now. College break." I froze. "You never told me." She opened the door halfway. Her hair was tied back, her expression unreadable. "I didn't think it mattered. Until now." We stood there, rainlight pooling around her doorway. I could smell tea brewing, the same kind she always ordered. Something about it felt final. "I don't know what this is," I said quietly, "but it doesn't feel wrong." Her lips pressed into a faint, trembling line. "That's exactly why it is." For a second, I thought she'd say more. Instead, she handed me my notebook, edges still damp from the rain. "You should go before he sees you." So I did. The next few days passed in fragments, a half-read text, a deleted draft, a moment where I nearly called her and didn't. Everything between us became a ghost, visible only when the light hit just right. I walked by the cafe again once. Her table was empty. The cup was gone. Only the faint ring of tea on the wood remained, perfectly circular, like a memory refusing to fade. That night, I typed a message and stared at it for hours. "You don't have to explain. Just tell me if I should stop waiting." I never sent it. I just watched the blinking cursor fade, like a heartbeat losing rhythm. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late when I saw her again. Same cafe, different quiet. She was sitting by the window, the one where the streetlight made everything look softer than it really was. Her hair was still damp from the rain, and there was an extra cup on the table, untouched. She looked up when I walked in, like she'd already expected it. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. "I know," I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "But I came anyway." The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was something else, a kind of waiting. She stirred her tea even though it was already cold. "My son saw your name on my phone," she said finally. "He asked if you were someone I used to teach." I waited. "I told him yes," she whispered. It was the only lie that sounded like the truth. Something inside me twisted, not from anger, but understanding. She wasn't protecting her reputation. She was protecting the fragile normal that she'd rebuilt. "I never wanted to make things harder for you," I said. She looked at me, eyes tired. "You didn't make anything harder. You just reminded me what it felt like to want again." That's not something I was ready for. The words hung there, soft but sharp enough to leave a mark. "I keep thinking about that day in the park," I said quietly. "You almost said something. She smiled faintly. I almost said everything. I nodded, my fingers brushing the rim of my cup. If you said it now, I'd still be too late. There was no anger in her voice. Just a calm acceptance, the kind that only comes from knowing something has already slipped through your fingers. She reached across the table, her hand hesitating halfway. Then she let it rest over mine, barely touching, like testing the temperature of water she wasn't sure she could enter. You'll meet someone, she said, her thumb grazing my knuckles. Someone who doesn't have to explain herself every time she feels something. And you? She exhaled, looking down. I'll go back to pretending that tea helps me sleep. That almost made me laugh, almost. Instead, I nodded. For a moment, neither of us moved. The world outside kept going, traffic, footsteps, someone's laughter bleeding through the door. Inside, it felt like everything had stopped. She finally pulled her hand away, and the warmth left with it. I stood, unsure how to end something that never really began. She looked up once more, her voice barely above a whisper. It was good, though. Wasn't it? I smiled, a small, honest kind. Yeah. It was. And then I left. No promises. No dramatic goodbye. Just the sound of the door closing behind me, and her soft okay fading into the air like it had been waiting all this time to be said. It's been almost a year since that night in the cafe. The world didn't collapse. Nothing dramatic happened. We just stopped orbiting each other for a while. I found a new job, a quieter apartment. The cafe changed its furniture, smaller tables, brighter lights. I still go sometimes, out of habit. I still order black coffee. I still glance at the window seat before I sit. She wasn't there for months. Then one morning, 8:47 a.m., I saw her again. Different coat, shorter hair, same way of sitting like she belonged to the silence around her. She noticed me before I could decide whether to wave. She smiled, a small, knowing smile, the kind that says we don't have to explain it anymore. I walked over. We didn't hug. We didn't even touch. Just two people who had already said everything they weren't supposed to. Chamomile? I asked. She nodded. Still pretending it helps me sleep. I laughed. Still pretending coffee wakes me up. We sat by the window, not the same one, but close enough. The rain outside was soft, unhurried. How's your son? I asked. Good, she said, eyes warm. He's back at school. Calls more often now. I told her about work, about moving, about how quiet the new place is. She smiled. You always liked quiet. We didn't fill the pauses this time. We just let them breathe. When she reached for her cup, our hands brushed, accidental, unintentional, completely ordinary. But it still felt like recognition. Not of what we were, but of what we survived being. She looked out the window, then back at me. You ever think about that night at the park? Sometimes, I said. Me too. Neither of us asked why. Some memories don't need permission to stay. I realized then how different everything felt. We weren't waiting anymore. We weren't avoiding either. Just two people sitting in the same hour of the same morning, finally comfortable with what didn't happen. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. You'll come by again? I nodded. Maybe next week. She smiled. I'll bring the tea. And that was enough. I watched her walk away, her reflection fading from the glass as the door swung shut. Outside, the city was waking up, slow buses, wet sidewalks, the hum of people who had no idea that, for a few minutes, something had quietly come full circle inside a coffee shop window. I finished my drink and looked at the second cup she'd left behind, half empty, the faint scent of chamomile still rising in the steam. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was something softer. Something that stayed without needing to ache. I think she felt it too.